he's seeking something more spiritual. He's experienced life, humanity, and finally despair. And by experiencing all this, he also experienced something that feels more spiritual and sacred. And he realizes that all these experiences themselves are sacred. Even the loss of life itself is a sacred experience. And even the human despair is spiritual. And he knows that these are very contradictory concepts, but he's been trying to seek out spirituality in his paintings.
Welcome to Season 5 of the Drawing from Experience podcast.
Your source of relatable advice for the everyday artist.
We want you to pick up your pencils, pick up your paintbrush,
pick up your instrument, or whatever it is that you create with. Because let's face it,
this world is so much better with your art in it.
Whether you're an artist looking for more inspiration,
or an art enthusiast that loves to hear about the creative process,
you've come to the right place.
My name is Shane Isakowski.
And I'm Stefania Medeiros.
And this is the Drawing from Experience podcast. Hello, humans. This is Shane Isakowski.
And I'm Stefania Medeiros.
And this is the Drawing from Experience podcast, episode number 128. Today, we are infinitely excited about the guests we have on. We've been preparing for this for a little while, and we're super stoked. And we have something kind of different today, which is going to be pretty neat.
I think that we have a very unique situation before us right now where we have actually connected with an artist internationally, and we will be getting the experience of having a translator with us. So this is a first. We're excited. We're very excited to learn about our artist today.
Yeah. And I'm just like, first and foremost, Lo's work is unbelievable. I mean, it's gorgeous work. And I just recently saw it at the LA Art Show with Arcadia Gallery. And they had a display of his work on the outside of the booth. And it's the kind of work that the reason they had it on the outside, I'm assuming, is because it just draws you in from afar, which it totally worked on me. So, and I had tagged him on the Instagrams, and he responded and was super sweet through messaging. And we asked him to be on the show. And yeah, so today we have his translator. His name is Jeffrey Wang with us, and he's going to be translating, and we're going to try to connect with an international artist whose first language is not English. So I'm super stoked about it. And if you find Lo's work online, you'll know what we're talking about. I mean, his work is unbelievable. He does these incredibly detailed oil paintings, portraits, and he has some unique parts to his style, which are hopefully we're going to be chatting about today. So
I cannot wait to pick his brain a little bit.
Yeah. So without further ado, here is our interview with Taiwanese artist Lo Chan Peng. On today's episode of the podcast, we have a very special guest, Mr. Lo Chan Peng.
Yes. Hi.
Welcome. And also his translator, Mr. Jeffrey Wang. Thank you guys so much for joining us.
It's our pleasure.
Thank you. To give you guys an idea of who Lo is, Lo has been awarded the Union Culture and Art Foundation Young Artist Award in 2004, the Chi Mei Cultivation Award in 2007, the Cathay Art Award Silver Award in 2006, and the Ko Swing something, I'm sorry for pronunciations, Award in 2008, the ARC Purchase Award in 2020, the People's Choice Award and the Honorable Mention / Portraiture Award from the Art Renewal Center. And you're also part of the Select 50 of the 22nd International Annual Portrait Competition of the Portrait Society of America. Lo is also working as an artist in residence, or has also worked as an artist in residence in worldwide institutions in LA and Berlin. And he's also an assistant professor in the Department of Art of Creative Design at Swing Chuang University in Taiwan. And again, accompanying Lo here, we have his translator here with us, Mr. Jeffrey Wang, who will be translating as needed. But thank you guys again so much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
Thank
Same
you.
Lo,
here.
we're so excited to get to know you and pick your brain a little bit about your beautiful work. And Jeffrey, thank you so much for joining us as well. Lo, I think we should just start asking the questions.
Yeah, let's just
Yeah.
get into it.
Please.
For sure.
Awesome. So Lo, it's obvious that you have a very strong background in your work. Your work is it's beautiful, and you've clearly been painting for a very long time. I'm very curious to know, what is your earliest memory you have of being creative or creating art?
Okay, thank you, Sophia. Okay, so I speak Chinese, all right?
Yes.
对，我大学即将快毕业最后一年，我真正才意识到自己开始创作，因为那个时候我其实已经得了台湾很多的绘画奖项，但是我一直有一个感觉，就是我始终距离艺术很遥远。我觉得这些奖项不能够让我了解什么是艺术，即使我获奖了，因为我觉得我只是在满足比赛的需求，我只是在满足评审，所以我决定我不要再参加比赛，并且好好的沉淀下来，好好的面对自己的画布，思考艺术是什么。那台湾是一个充满多元文化的环境，我们也受到很多不同国家的影响，因为台湾在历史中也曾经得到就是有受到很多很多国家的殖民，包括荷兰，包括日本，那包括现在它都还是国际势力角逐的一个地方，所以我尝试着表现出跟我同样年龄的人们好像在 pop 里面这种绚烂的五光十色的外表，但是内在是一个在寻求自我的某种内部的面孔，然后我透过这种表象来创作出一系列的作品，因为我觉得如果我们还无法真正找到自己是什么的时候，就把我眼睛看到的画下来。所以对我来说，这是我在那一年开始思考什么叫做创作。
Basically, Mr. Lowe started creating pieces during his senior year, last year of college, and he's received a lot of awards by then. And he felt the path of being an artist was still rather distant. Like, he's won a lot of awards and satisfied a lot of judges in competitions, but it couldn't sate his true hunger for art. And eventually he stopped going to competitions to ponder and think about the true meaning of art. And he thought Taiwan is a very multicultural place, and it was affected by cultures like Japan and Poland and a lot of different colonies that colonized it over the past. So he was thinking how to represent all these cultures and the changes that Taiwan's been through. So he developed a series describing people of his age at a time going to nightclubs and having the time of their life, having fun, but deep down inside, it's all a shallow shell where they feel empty with a sense of dread and inner turmoil about the uncertain future within. So that became his quest on seeking out how to create original pieces.
Wow, thank you so much for that response. We have a question actually about Chinese culture and your thoughts on that.
So this was the question that we found, and this is a quote by you. Because we have failed to find our own cultural uniqueness, our generation would like to establish our own. And what is unique about our culture is that there is nothing distinguishing about it. Can you explain a little bit what you mean by saying that there is nothing distinguishing about it? And how do you think that this failure to find uniqueness affects your own artwork?
Okay, thank you. 我想我当初写这一篇报道的文字的时候，有一个前提哦，它主要是在谈论我的背景来自台湾的普遍文化，所以我想对于你们的角度来说，可能不是那么熟悉。那在台湾的情况是，我们至现今仍然会有比较明显的是美国跟中国的一个有点类似代理战争。我不确定 Jeffrey 理不理解这个英文代理战争。那 包括我们邻近的很多的国家，韩国或日本，他们的文化其实都非常非常的强势哦，包括他们的电影，包括他们的漫画，包括他们的艺术。所以，对于我们台湾在创造或者是在接受或者理解自己文化的时候，其实往往我们很难提出一个 icon。那但是呢，其实我也渐渐发现，现在我们的世界其实有点走到类似的情况。这个世界，我要不要先停在这边，让 Jeffrey 先讲？
Okay, so this is coming from a personal biased opinion and background of Mr. Lo on the Taiwanese culture, because this is from Taiwanese standpoint. He feels like we're stuck between China and US, and we're affected by our neighbors, their cultures, like Japan, their comics, anime, art, but Taiwan doesn't seem to have a strong cultural background of its own. But the world is moving towards globalization. And all right, continue back to Mr. Lowe.
所以我不确定大家有没有发现，现今我们在旅行的时候，在世界各地的主要的城市，他们看起来都很像。当我在东京、伦敦、上海、纽约，或者是我到西藏拉萨这样子的城市的时候，他们其实看起来都非常的类似，包括电影院、咖啡厅、H&M、Zara， 在世界各地可能大家都在讨论类似的事情 ，Tesla、艾未未、元宇宙、Metaverse， 或者是某个皇室的丑闻，或是某个恐怖攻击。所以我认为，现今的人们也正在走向一个全球有共同的共识、共同的世界观的道路上面。当然，现在可能还不是那么明显，或许大家在世界的某个角落听到这段广播，他不会这么想，但是我相信未来会越来越接近的。所以我的创作也在尝试着走向全人类共同的语言，并且表达人类共同的感受。
So, as Mr. Lowe was saying, the world is moving towards globalization. And as he travels between different cities, as he noticed each cities are starting to look the same, he's been to Tokyo, London, Shanghai, New York, even Lhasa in Tibet. And all these cities share commonalities. They have movie theaters, cafes, similar brands of clothing stores like Zara or H&M. And the conversations that people have, they talk about Tesla cars, they gossip about celebrities, they talk about terrorist attacks, they talk about new metaverse in the computers, the visuals, many common topics are seen across different parts of the world. And I think this shows the world is uniting as one as we speak. And through his art, he's trying to show that we humans share a common language, that is the feelings that we have towards these ideas. And it may not be obvious right now to us immediately, but he wants his art to speak to a global audience.
Thank you so much for that response. And I do totally agree. When I visit different cities, I see a lot of those common things as well. And in a way, I feel like it's a lot of technology. It's because technology unites us globally, and so I do feel like that is impacting the fact that a lot of these cities are kind of looking the same. They're having the same conversations because we are having those conversations globally. I would love to actually talk more about your artwork and also some of the advice that you have for other artists. So I was curious, what are some of the most common mistakes that you see your students in your classes, or other artists for that matter, while making their work?
OK， 所以他想知道说，想多了解你的美术，那知道说你在你的学生中看到他们最常犯的一些错误是什么，或者什么意见给他们吗？
All right, thank you. 对我而言，我觉得是心态。我自己教导的学生哦，如果是来自于我自己的，其实大多都有受到我自己非常严格的要求，所以他们在心态上面已经调整得很好。我怎么要求呢？我会希望他们尽量严格的对待自己，并且超越昨天的自己。OK， 但在我以往所就读的艺术学院里面哦，至今 我的同学们至今仍作为艺术家的，目前不到3位，所以这样的比例不能说高。所以在这样的经验中，我觉得心态是最重要的。如果我们能够非常严肃的看待自己的工作，我们才有可能在这样子残酷的作为职业艺术家的道路中存活下来。所以我会用存活 survive 这2个字。在这个时代，我觉得艺术的技术层面其实已经非常多样了，你很难说哪一些技术是正确的，哪一些技术是错误的。可是我认为技术，你表现出来的技术会反映出你是谁，还有你的心态。
Mr. Lo thinks that the artists in general are very hard on themselves. They already have really good disciplines. His students have great self-disciplines, but he wants them to be even more strict with themselves and demand to give themselves their 150%. Because of all his classmates back in the academy when he went to school, only three classmates remain that still is an artist. And he thinks that by going deep into introspection and having a serious look upon themselves and their work, can they survive this harsh journey of being an artist? And he used the word survive because being an artist, surviving as a traditional artist is not an easy task. It's not an easy goal to achieve. And he thinks that there's so many layers to art. It's hard to determine which techniques are superior to which. But he does think that techniques represents who you are as a person and your mentality that you have going into art.
Thank you so much for that answer.
Yeah.
I think that we can all agree that many artists, if not all, are incredibly hard on themselves. So it's no surprise that it's a very common thing that you see in the classroom. And that makes a lot of sense as well. And I also agree that artists should be able to look past that seeking of perfection. And I also remember reading too from an interview about your own journey and seeking perfection with your own work. I thought it was a very interesting thing how the common goal, from what I understand and from what I've gathered from you, is that it's not about seeking perfection, it's about being authentic to yourself.
所以呢，他从你的美术中，他学到说，他看到你之前的访谈说，并不是找到完全的完美，而是找到说怎么表现出你真正的自己。在你的美术中，你是怎么表现出真正的自己呢
All right 这是一个非常困难的问题。其实我们对于理解自己，它是一个过程，是一个 process。昨天的我跟今天的我不会是一样的，所以这永远是一个浮动的状态。或许某些事件会让我更发现原来我自己是谁，原来我自己是自私的，原来我自己是罪恶的。可是某些事件它会让我发现原来我也有圣洁的一面，原来我也有神圣的一面。这是一个漫长的过程，我不会把自己看作是一个节点，而是一个非常长的一个变化。
Understanding of oneself is a process. The me from yesterday is not the same as the me from today. And different events throughout the day makes me realize who I am as a person. Something shows that maybe I am guilty of things and maybe selfish at times, but it also shows that sometimes I may be selfless and even have a sacred and holy aspect to myself where I do things for the better of the world. And I see this growth as a process. It changes over time and reflects it in my own art.
I love that. I just have to say, I love that response so much. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that.
And as we dive deeper into your artwork and things that you add to your work to make it unique to you, I have a quote here from your website, and it says, "Lo adds elements to spoil the pictures, thereby bringing a strong and unique visual experience to the viewers, also transferring the abstract concept into something that can be seen." Could you expand a little bit on your process of spoiling the pictures, what that means, and not just in the technique, not just in the meaning, but in the technique itself, and just explain a little bit more about that?
所以在第3题中，他问你的技术上，不只是技术上，技术层面跟内心层面，你去破坏你的美术的意义是什么？为什么做这些破坏？然后他希望听的除了心理层面以外，他想听技术层面的回应。
OK，那我分三段，我先分三段，然后再请 Jeffrey 一段一段开始好了，因为这样我们不会把一次太长这样子，好吗？这几年我才开始尝试破坏这个概念，放到我的画面里面。其实，在更早之前，我追求的是一个完美的画面。我希望我的油画的表面是一尘不染、光滑平整，甚至是超越相机的。所以这当然是我曾经受到了古典绘画、古典主义以及照相写实主义 （super realism） 的影响了。但是随着年纪的过去，以及我经历到的一些人生的体验，我对绘画的理解其实也在改变。我认为人们尝试去超越人类的手的这个行为，这个概念是没有意义的，因为人类是有局限的，我们应该接受它，并且在接受它的前提下，展现出人类的手的光辉。
Okay, so this is going to be a long answer, so we're going to break this down to a three-part answer. So Mr. Lo began scarring, like damaging and scarring his paintings in more recent years. Back then, he used to seek perfection and photorealism in his paintings. Initially, when he first started, he wanted a smooth and clean oil painting to be even more photorealistic and photographed. He was trying to go for super realism, super photorealism, because he was heavily influenced by the classic art and classical artists. But it affected his growth and understanding of art. And as he got older, his understanding of art grew, and he found it meaningless to recreate a perfect replica when cameras are already invented. So he realized such a limit of what the human hand can do, what a brush can do. And instead of trying to recreate this photorealism where photographs has already achieved it, he's aiming to break up the balance between perfection and deliver the truth behind his work.
I love that.
Okay, thank you, Jeffrey. OK, next part. 目前我正在寻找画面的一种两个对立的两端的中间点。意思是什么呢？意思是我们眼睛看到的影像是一个完整的影像，完整的影像它都会有一个完整的造型。所以我认为打破这个造型，打破这个完整的造型，透过这个动作，我可以传递出一种隐藏在表象底下的真实。当然，这个真实是我认为人性的某个面向，或者说这是我的自画像。
Okay, so what does it mean to find balance? In each of us, we have this perfect image of ourselves. And by breaking that perfect image of ourselves in our portraits, he wants to find the deeper truth that reflects your inner turmoil, inner self within.
所以人在表象的外表之下，存在着更接近神圣、神秘跟难以化为文字的某种精神性。这种精神状态非常的复杂，混沌跟秩序，虔诚跟亵渎，解放跟禁锢跟囚禁。那我常常感觉到自己总是处在这个两端哦，此岸与彼岸，他们有一种难以理解的鸿沟，而我的创作就介于此与彼的中间，是到达彼岸之前的一种神秘的游戏。
Okay, so Mr. Lo, he projects himself into these paintings. He thinks hidden beneath the surface, there's something deeply sacred and spiritual that's hard to describe in words. It's like a mental state that dwells between order and chaos, being humble and sacrilegious, having freedom and still being captivity. He feels like he's playing a game to try and find balance and bounce between back and forth between these ideas and trying to find the horizon that he couldn't see before.
Thank you, Jeffrey. 然后接下来这一段我们就没有文字，我就是专注回答在技术上面的部分了。所以为了要打破这个造型，为了要创造出我没有看过的东西，以及超越影像给我的之上的东西，或者是突破它，其实这一个是非常困难的。所以我总是觉得我在创作中每一刻都在不断的做各种抉择，因为我要抉择这个打破的造型在画面的表现上是这个方向好还是那个方向好，是颜料更厚好，然后打破哪里好，才能更接近我自己。Okay?
On a very technical level, in order to create beyond what you see in design and photos, in terms of technique, he finds it really difficult. He finds himself making decisions on every step of the way. Should he use a thicker paint here or thinner paint here? Should he dilute it? Should he use a more transparent paint? Should he more opaque paint? Should he break up the brushstrokes here, or should he leave brushstrokes wider? He's trying to make decisions every step of the way to reflect his inner self more, trying to decide what kind of brushstroke it represents what he's feeling at the moment.
So you're saying that you make those decisions as you're going along, not necessarily according to just the materials and the actual technical part, but it's really more about the emotional part of it and how you're feeling.
所以他的意思说，你并不是只是技术性的看那个决定用什么颜料，而是很多是用感觉上，你用感觉来觉得说，诶，这个在这时候比较合适，是用感觉来决定你的颜料吗？
哦，是的，因为没有一个事物，如果 OK，当我们如果足够深入，足够非常非常的深入，针对某一个事物的时候，那个外在的事物理论上来说是要变成我们肉体的。笔就像我的手指，我的皮肤就像画布，颜料就像是我的血跟肉。所以一旦它成为肉体以后，它就只剩下感觉，而不是纯粹的理性。好，谢谢。
So yes, it is very subjective at a time. So as he delved deep enough into a subject, it becomes part of yourself. He thinks of the brush as his hands, and the canvas as his skin, and the paint that he uses is his blood. And once it reaches that point, it becomes the feeling of what fits the most at a time and how he wants to express the inner version of himself to the world.
I think that's another beautiful way of, once again, expressing your intent within your work, especially coming back full circle to the intent to add elements that make your portraits look less perfect. I think that just brings it back down to that humanity that makes these paintings so easy to connect with when people look at it. And I think that's what resonates is you've come full circle with starting with wanting to seek perfection and knowing that you can reach that or get very close to that, looking at your work and making the decision to not make your work look as perfect, and then coming back down and bringing it down to that human level. And there's something very magical about that I believe, at least with my perception and probably so many others, that really allows your work to resonate so much with people.
Yeah, I totally agree. So Lo, you've described your journey with my painting techniques have changed through these past few years' exploration. If one sees hyperrealistic painting as a path and the change of style as the finishing line to this path, then one could certainly reach a higher ground before the change of style, yet staying within the same path. And so something a lot of artists struggle with is that it's never going to feel like enough, that there is no finish line. And once you get your skills to reach a certain point with, say, hyperrealism, you find yourself wanting more or changing your process completely to accommodate your need to explore and experiment. How do you make those decisions of where to steer your actual techniques, the things that we're talking about? And what kind of advice can you give to artists who might be struggling with where to take their artwork?
OK， 所以随着你一开始变到hyperrealism 那个非常真实，像是真实照片的时候，你想要往更高的走，然后走不上去之后，你开始变成风格在改变。那很多艺术家他们在学习在找寻这个路程，这风格改变的路程中，你觉得有什么建议给他们来改变，来寻找这改变，给他们这个路程上？什么样的建议可以找到他们自己的风格呢？应该是第6题。
就我现在其实还是在保持改变的状态。那对于很多艺术家而言，包括我自己，我们的改变，它不会在几年之间看到结果，因为我们可能会花几年的时间去摸索。那到达我所谓的我的改变完成的时候，它又是另外一个改变的开始。所以这个是一个永恒的状态在我们的生命中。
Okay, so Mr. Lo is going through changes right now in his art, and many artists are still going through change throughout the years. And it takes artists years to morph, to go through this metamorphosis in art. And even now, he's still going through change, and he thinks that it's a process that's ever going and never ending.
那我可以在这边解释一下，说什么是观察命运呢？很多时候我们可能没有意识到自己的命运是被推动的，就很多时候我们可能认为我们正在决定自己的命运，而没有发现它其实是有剧本。当然，我并不会认为说这个剧本我们是无法参与其中共同决定的，可是关键是我认为它是有剧本的。我想说的是，我们可以尝试的站在第三人称的眼光，观看被命运推动的自我，并且观察，或许会发现，大多数的时候，我们可能会像自动导航机器一样在做我们认为的选择。所以我认为这几种方式都不错：旅行、阅读、探索自己跟观察命运，试着用第三人称的角度看自己，会是一个很好的方式去突破你现在的艺术家现在的状况。
Here are Mr. Lo's suggestions for if you're stuck in a rut or you want to find your own style. He thinks that traveling, reading, self-discovery, and observing fate is a good way to find inspiration. And to elaborate on what observing fate means, he often observes fate and he doesn't realize, he thinks that we as a people don't realize we're being led by fate. And sometimes people think we're in control of our own fate. But sometimes fate is written on a script and we're just following the script. And we may have some control over its directions, but if we take a step back and observe our life from the sidelines as a third person, we begin to question whether the choices we make in life are really our own. And he thinks that this kind of observation of oneself on one's fate makes a huge impact on changes in style.
Creative Conquest.
Helen Jean Nichols says, I got a lot of work copyrighted, which isn't creative, but a conquest related to creativity. Helen, congratulations on getting your work copyrighted. There are some parts of doing art that just aren't fun, and copywriting is definitely one of them. So congrats on getting that done. I definitely consider that a conquest. Sandra Spector says, I now have 11 pieces for my Urban Decay series with 3 more pieces that are nearly finished. This is the most I've ever done in a year. It probably wouldn't have happened if not for COVID. Sandra, I completely agree. There are so many different opportunities that have been brought to the table because of COVID, and it sounds like this worked in your favor. Congratulations on finishing those pieces. Derek Moore says, finished this digital piece as album art for a band. It's my first digital commission, as I usually work traditionally in acrylic or oil. Derek, there's nothing more exciting than stepping out of your comfort zone and having the project be a complete success. Congrats on finishing the commission, and thanks for sharing the image of your work in the group as well. If you're interested in sharing your creative conquests, you can find us on Facebook at the Drawing from Experience Creative Community.
I mean, I would say that is a huge comment about control, in our lives, and how uncontrollable, we have so much that we cannot control. And especially right now with the pandemic and everything going on, there's so much uncertainty and things that we have absolutely no control over. That's something that I personally struggle with as well. Like anything that I don't have control over, I'm freaking out all the time, So so I completely resonate with that. I completely understand what you're saying. And so do you have advice for people who are trying to hold on to that control, or trying to control every aspect of their life, aside from just like, let it go, there's nothing you can do, life is going to be what it is? Do you have any advice for those kinds of people who are hanging on to that and just trying to get through and discover who they are?
所以呢，他说现在疫情这么不受控制，然后这世界上这么多混乱的事情，然后每天这种无法预测事情的发生，那你有没有任何建议给这些想要给人生有点稍微有控制的人有一些建议呢？让他们知道说，好像不是人生全部都是命运在掌管，是没有办法控制的。对于那些想要控制自己人生的，然后希望人生有更多掌管权的人，你对他们有什么样的建议或帮助吗？
OK， 谢谢 ，Thank you。我自己在人生的某个阶段，我也希望能够重新拿回自己命运的控制。我不会说这个是不对的，我不会说这个是错误的，但是这个想法可能，但但是在某些情况下，这个想法可能会让你更痛苦，或者是让你更明白自己根本无法控制。OK， 我先说到这边，然后我们等一下接下一段。
In Mr. Lo's own life, in the past, he's tried to obtain control over his own life. And he won't say it's a wrong thing to do to have some control over life. But from his experience, in some scenarios, trying to gain control over your own life and fate may lead to even more painful experiences. And I'm going to let him continue.
我的意思是说，难道事情没有可能发展成所有一切都不按照你的想法，所有的一切都往最坏的结果前进的可能性吗？我是说，这个是有可能的。那当我们在可以接受的、在可以做的时候，尽量去做，这个是完全正确的。但是如果一旦真的有到最坏的情况，即便你已经做了任何一切的事情，但是如果当他走到最坏的情况的时候，我的建议是接受它，然后坐在这个事情的里面，然后静下来。
So sometimes everything goes completely haywire and out of control in the worst possible scenarios. And he thinks it's a good idea to just do the best with everything that you have. But sometimes life just kicks you and deal with you the worst hand possible. And his suggestion is to sometimes just sit down, accept fate, and meditate on these ideas and come to terms with your inner self.
I really appreciate what you're saying there, Lo, about learning to let go and not try to control events that you can and can't control. I think that is something that is like a foundational rule that I think people should just try to let go and not allow circumstances that aren't even within like the present moment to take over and create now a more negative situation for yourself by trying to control something that isn't within your realm of control.
Yeah. Thank you for that response. In an interview with Chang Hong Bin, you mentioned your wife passing away from an illness as a major turning point for you, as I would imagine it would be for anyone. You go on to say that it was the greatest hardship you've had to endure, but you also matured a lot from that experience. Would you be able to elaborate on how this loss in your life has helped you mature and how it has impacted your art?
就是他说在你的一些之前访谈有提到说，你的太太过世的时候，对你的影响非常的大。那这些对你的人生的改变跟你的美术有什么样的影响呢？可以分享这一段吗？
这是一个非常巨大的改变了，所以当我们上一题或者是我们前面的价值观有很多都是来自于我当时的体会，包含我前面提到的破坏的概念。Jeffrey， 我们这是第6题，对不对？第6题，所以我就是正在回答。对，第6题
我的数字已经乱掉了，不过没错，应该是。
OK， 好。所以包含我们前面提到的破坏的概念，以及观看我们自己命运的概念。但是我可以在这边分享我艺术在追求的神圣性，因为我自己在这样的经验中，强烈的碰到生命，还有这个过程中的人性跟绝望的这种概念。所以在一次的经验中，我触及了所谓的神圣，我才意识到说，原来在这样的一切的过程中，有神圣蕴含在里面。没有错，生命的失去本身就有神圣性，人的绝望也有神圣性。我知道这是一个非常相反的概念，跟非常相反的 一种感受。但是在此之后，我一直想在我的创作中去找到它。我不确定这是否就像是希腊神话的薛西弗斯哦，是一个永远无法抵达终点的旅行。但是透过一张又一张的画布，我在尝试着是否可以找到神圣性，以及它到底是什么。所以我该怎么形容我的创作呢？我觉得每一张画都像是各种面向的自画像，或者是神圣的各种面向。
So yes, losing his wife was indeed a huge turning point in his life. And a lot of his current personal values come from the feeling that he had at the time, including how he scars and damages his paintings and observing his own fate. These are ideas he's learned and gotten through during that time. And he's mentioned this before. Um, he's seeking something more spiritual. He's experienced life, humanity, and finally despair. And by experiencing all this, he also experienced something that feels more spiritual and sacred. And he realizes that all these experiences themselves are sacred. Even the loss of life itself is a sacred experience. And even the human despair is spiritual. And he knows that these are very contradictory concepts, but he's been trying to seek out spirituality in his paintings. And perhaps he described this like Sisyphus from the Greek mythologies, where it's a never-ending journey of, and like in the story of Sisyphus, he's pushing a rock up a mountain every day and rolls back down. It's like a never-ending journey. So if it was to describe his art, he would say it's like a reflection of himself. It's like a self-portrait, and it's very spiritual in many aspects. And this is a spirituality that he's seeking through his art.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. I would imagine that having to explore those things have been really difficult, and I really appreciate you sharing that with us. So you've spoken about sustained loneliness as being the biggest challenge of your career. Do you feel that being alone as an artist is very much a part of it? The fact that we're in our studios by ourselves, exploring what certain themes and things mean to us in order to translate that and turn it into our artwork. This is a very solitary process for us. So while it can be very isolating, do you also feel like it's necessary and that we need to figure out how to cope with that loneliness and isolation?
他说，当一个画家是一个很孤独的工作，然后，当你独自一个人在你的画室里面工作的时候，你觉得画家是需要去面对孤独，去学习怎么跟孤独相处的吗？
对，我觉得孤独是必要的，所以有时候我其实很矛盾了。当我非常孤独的时候，我会感到很难受。但是当我坐在朋友里面，坐在一群朋友里面的时候，我又非常希望进入孤独的状态。所以我至今也不知道该怎么面对它。但是你知道，孤独是一个过程，它不是一个点哦。孤独的前段它是来的是无声无息的，中段是无预警的让你感受到孤独，在尾端它又消失的无影无踪。所以我认为还是站在第三人称的角度观察自己的孤独，比较可能让其中去蕴含哲学性。如果孤独是无法避免的话。
Mr. Lowe thinks that facing solitude is a necessary part of growth. He does feel conflicted. He feels terrible when he's alone and in solitude. Yet sometimes when he's in a group of people, he seeks that comfort of solitude, and he doesn't really quite know how to face it. And sometimes he enjoys the solitude, other times he fears it. And to this day, he still doesn't know how to face it. But he thinks solitude is a journey, a process, and it's not the end. Solitude comes and goes in life. And by taking a step back and having introspection upon your own life from a third person's point of view, it may be a philosophical way of understanding solitude, even if it can't be avoided.
I agree. I actually, the reason why this was a question for us, at least for me personally, I'm like, I struggle with that as well, about the idea of having to be alone here, just sitting and painting in my studio by myself. I'm actually a very extroverted, social person, and so like I really like crave interaction with people. But being an artist, you're forced to sit here and just paint and paint and paint and be in your own head and be doing it, grinding over and over. And sometimes it's painful. It's like I want to be social, I want to talk to other people, but it's hard when you're trying to do this work, you know. So I do agree that it is a process, and you know, personally I've had to learn a lot through that entire process of being alone.
Oh, thank you you're sharing. Yeah， 我常常觉得我的工作室的外面那一扇窗哦，我常常觉得外面的世界，我好像坐在火车的铁轨上面的里面哦，然后我常常觉得外面的世界是咻咻咻这样子过去，可是我坐在画布前面的这个 studio 的空间是完全就是凝结在那里的。
So thanks for sharing. And he feels like Mr. Lo feels like his studio is like a cart in a train, and when he looks out the window, things just flies by, like shoo shoo flies by, and yet somehow in the studio he's completely still, and things are stagnant while the world is progressing outside, and that's what he feels like.
I find this response a little bit more relatable for me. I do understand the loneliness and isolation, how that can be a little bit difficult over time working, you know, alone as an artist. But I enjoy the solitude and isolation, and I think that response that Lo just gave us about how it's like the world is just spinning by and flying by. I think that's what I've grown to love about working alone, is having that silence. And I've gone as far as just turning all of my music off and allowing myself to just work. And you get into this almost transcendental state, and it really just feels like the world is just, you know, it's moving on as it should, and it's like you are in this other place separated from all of that. And I think that's a really great element to the solitude of working as well. So the next question we have for you, Lo, is what is the most important piece of advice you could offer to any artist learning how to paint or trying to improve their painting ability? And what do you wish someone would have told you?
所以他说你会给新手画家或正在学习画画的人什么样的建议？然后你自己本身有得到什么样的建议？你会可以建议这些画画的学习的人们？
我先谈一下我自己学习的过程哦。我学习的过程其实相当的有趣哦。我觉得自己还蛮会画画的。啊，对不起，我的狗，过来，不可以。
Bruce Lee.
Yes, yes.
Bring him
yes.
in. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. 不可以，回来，坐下。我在大学的阶段呢，我的学校在山上，所以我在那边呢，我就把自己搬到一个深山里面，然后我关在里面。其实我很少去学校上课。那我有什么需要知道的绘画的知识呢？我就会去图书馆或者是去书局，把所有相关的书全部买回来。我指的是所有我能够找到的，然后开始学习绘画的各种技巧。那包含我们等一下会提到的古典的3大油画的技巧：照染法、多层次画法跟直接画法。然后当我结束了我的大学，当我下山以后，我才发现，哇，大家好像觉得我画得非常的好。好，我们第一 part 先在这里。
Okay, so this is Mr. Lo's own history of learning. He thought he was a decent artist as a child, and his college was in the mountains, so he kind of shut himself in, and he didn't attend classes often. He did go to the bookstore and bought all the art-related books and borrowed all the art-related books in the library. And when he said all, he meant all the books. And he tried to learn traditional skills like glazing, painting layers, and direct painting. And by the time he was learning all of this in college and he came out, people thought he was amazing at art. And that's part one.
Okay, thank you. 所以 在这样的学习过程中，我认为绘画有很多形式嘛，但是我认为一个有系统的学习的训练是重要的。现在有很多的教学学校或是教育系统，我认为学习像传统的艺术学习是没有必要的，他们认为这个是太旧的。可是我觉得这是错的。我觉得当我们学习传统的技巧，不是为了重复他们的系统，而是重新打造一个自己的系统啊，这是 Part Two。
So Mr. Lo thinks there are many forms of art, and having a solid foundation on realism is very important. And a lot of current art educational system omits the necessity of traditional studies. And he doesn't think it's a good way to approach art. We're not replicating the old system, but we're trying to make something new out of the system what we had, making a new system of art education.
是的，所以其实一切都是关于系统，因为当我们建构出自己的系统的时候，你才能够用一个 system 的一个 system 就是系统，你才能用一个系统的角度在看待自己做的东西。所以其实我也很希望透过这一次的分享，介绍我跟 Jeffrey 一起做的这个绘画课程哦。那我们有分很多的 level， 那我们是将最一开始 Jeffrey 正在将我的传统油画3大技法照染法、多层次画法、painting in layers 所以说 Ella Prima 直接画法的课程翻译成英文了，并且用英文的语音的方式呈现出来。那目前我们已经快完成翻译字幕的阶段，然后 Jeffrey 接下来会录音成英文的语音。然后我们还会再翻译下一个难度的，也就是完全我自己的系统的课程，叫做罗展鹏的秘密。
Okay, so art is about being systematic. It's only through a systematic approach can you go back and analyze your work and the process you're doing and your techniques. So Mr. Lo is taking this chance to introduce his drawing classes that both him and I have been working on together. We've been making these painting lectures where he teaches 3 of the most mainstream traditional oil painting techniques: Alma Prima, painting in layers, and direct painting glazing. And we're translating these courses into English, and I'll be dubbing them into English as well. So the translations are almost done, and we'll begin the dubbing process in the near future. And after that, there's a bonus course with a lot of advanced techniques that Mr. Lo has. So feel free to visit our Gumroad link if you're interested in finding out more.
We will include that link in the show notes for the episode as well. That's really exciting. I mean, that's super exciting to our audience, I'm sure. That's awesome. I did see that on your YouTube channel that you were translating those courses. So that is really, really cool. You know, aside from that, you have a featured interview in Beautiful Bazaar magazine, issue number 36. It's coming out really soon. I'm super stoked to read that interview. But what else can we expect from you this year?
Okay, thank you. 是的，我今年还有我想一下，Jeffrey 这边有4个展览，但其实后面又新增了两个，所以总共有6个展览。那除了这边4个Arcadia Contemporary 在 LAR Show 的展览，然后还有2间日本画，一间在比利时的在5月，然后2间日本的画廊在7月8月。然后当然台北艺博台北 Art Taipei Fair 在10月，还有那个俄罗斯在莫斯科的 Art Life 的一个展出在11月左右，所以大概这是我今年的计划。
Okay, so Mr. Lo will have 6 different gallery showings so far planned for this year. Group show Arcadia Contemporary in New York, and USA and Los Angeles art show. Arcade Contemporary in New York, and there's a Los Angeles art show in January, and in I can't pronounce Belgium, Verdun Gallery in Belgium, and Sumire Gallery in Tokyo, Japan, and in Ginza there's a show as well, Ginza, Japan, and then there's a Art Taipei Fair in October and the Art Live in Moscow in November.
Yeah, that is a full plate so far, and I'm sure that's not even everything. But yeah, thank you so much. And yeah, Stefania, did you have any closing remarks or anything for our guest here?
Going back to Lo, your answer about the advice you'd give to artists. I just want to say I appreciate the input on that, just since we didn't touch upon that. But and yeah, congratulations on all of the shows you have coming up, and we look forward to seeing more of your growth and your evolution too, as you continue to evolve and change within your work, as you were mentioning. And you have a lot of exciting things to look forward to.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. Thank you for agreeing to do this as well. And I know that this isn't a typical format for an interview for an American audience, but I really appreciate the both of you being here.
It is my pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you. If you guys enjoyed this episode of the Drawing from Experience podcast, you can stream and download previous episodes on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or our website, drawingfromexperience.com. You can also join the Drawing from Experience creative community on Facebook, and you can find us on Instagram at DFE Podcast or our Patreon at patreon.com/drawingfromexperience. And you can find my personal art at shaneisakowski.com or patreon.com/shaneisakowski, or on Instagram or Facebook at Shane Isakowski Artist.
And you can find me at StefaniaMedeiros.com, StefaniaMedeiros _ on Instagram, and patreon.com/StefaniaMedeiros.
Thank you guys again. We really appreciate this. I look forward to hearing what people think about you and your work and your philosophies and everything. And I look forward to seeing some more of your art. I'm here in the LA area, so every time you send art over here, I'm going to go try to find it. So thank you again.
Yes, thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
joining us.
Thank you.